Hey, I've got some super exciting news. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know I'm working on a 1v1 fantasy wargame for mobile called Manafields. In Manafields, you create a custom army list, you deploy it into battle, and then you take turns with your opponent, issuing orders to your units, fighting in melee, shooting from range, using spells and heroic abilities, and capturing objectives. The super exciting news is that all of the rules of the game are fully implemented. You can now play an entire game of Manafields with all the general rules and the special rules that make it interesting. The other really exciting news is that I've received art assets for all of the launch factions. So in this video, I want to take you through all of these factions and show you how each of them lends a different playstyle to the game. To help us put these factions into some context, let's just take a quick look at how player turns work in Manafields. On your turn, you'll get 3 order points that you can use to issue orders to your units. You can give all 3 of those orders to a single unit, or you can spread them out however you like. There's also a second resource called morale. You start the game with 2 morale, and you get an extra 1 each time you kill an enemy unit. The move order costs 1 order point, and it allows you to move a unit a number of squares equal to their speed. If the unit is adjacent to an enemy, however, the move order costs 2 order points instead of 1. The fight order costs 1 order point, and it allows you to make a melee attack against an adjacent unit. The shoot order costs 2 order points and allows you to make a shooting attack against a unit in range. The heroic ability order costs 1 order point and allows your heroes to use their special abilities to manipulate the battlefield. These abilities are things like casting spells that push units away, or giving out buffs, or inspiring your units to move further up the board. The march order costs 3 order points and 1 morale, and allows you to move every single unit in your army 1 square. And finally, the faction ability order costs 0 order points and 5 morale, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So the main thing to remember is that you're working with only 3 order points each turn. Deciding where and how to use them is kind of the heart of the strategy of this game. When you create your own unique army list, you can choose from one of these 4 factions: humans, elves, orcs, and undead. When you pick a faction in Manafields, you gain access to 2 special rules. The first is a passive rule. This is a special rule that only applies to your faction and is always in play. You don't have to spend any points to use it, it's just always there. The second is a faction ability. You have to charge up your faction ability over a few turns by killing enemy units. And once it's charged up, you can use it for free to deliver a devastating ultimate ability that can help you to strike out and decisively win a game. Let's look at the passive rules first. One of my favorites is the undead passive rule. If an enemy unit dies within 4 squares of an undead hero, they come back as a zombie under the undead player's control. This is a crazy strong passive rule. If you position your heroes just right, you can be making zombies all over the board. And best of all, they'll be counting towards the number of units you have on objectives, helping you to increase your score. Zombies are also a great way to gum up your enemy's units, forcing them to spend points on combats that offer them no value in return. Meanwhile, the rest of your army pushes up the board. The Elves passive rule applies to all of your units that are on foot. It allows your units to make a move for free after they fight in melee, but only if they still have enemies left around them. Elves in Manafields are all about lightning fast reflexes and maneuvers. Take this for example. Here this Warmaster hero is safely protected by 2 infantry units on either side of him. If he were to move up, fight, and then be stuck here on the other side of the objective, the opponent would be able to slaughter him without having to put any of his own pieces out of position. But with the Elves passive rule, foot units can jump forward, slice their enemies, and then leap back to safety. If the opponent wants to get him now, they'll have to contend with his friends on either side of him. Other factions are not as nimble as this. Usually a move order costs 2 order points if you're adjacent to an enemy. So the first move would cost 1, the fight order would cost 1, and you would only have 1 order point remaining. Not enough to retreat from combat. The Orcs passive rule has to do with their incredible ferocity and melee prowess. When making attacks in Manafields, the number of dice you get to roll is based on how much health that unit has left. For example, an infantry unit at full health has 12 HP, so they get to roll 12 dice. But if they've taken 6 damage, they only have 6 HP remaining, and they only roll 6 dice when they attack. Orcs, however, always get to roll the maximum number of dice, even if they're badly damaged. So an Orc infantry unit with 1 HP remaining still gets to roll all 12 dice when he attacks. Normally, opponents might tend to ignore badly damaged units in favour of destroying full health units that pose more of a threat. When facing Orcs, however, all of their units are just as threatening as each other, no matter how much chip damage you've done to them. Orcs only stop being scary once they're dead. The Humans passive rule is that they deal +1 damage in melee if they haven't moved earlier in the turn. It's a defensive ability that dissuades your opponent from leaving their units next to yours. In Manafields, each dice you roll to attack is worth a certain amount of damage. For infantry, their dice are worth 2 damage each, and at full health, they're rolling 12 dice. So 12 dice multiplied by 2 damage each is 24 total possible damage coming out of an infantry unit. Human infantry, however, when they have not moved, are doing 3 damage per dice, for a total possible output of 36 damage in a single attack. Human troops that are holding the line are an incredibly scary prospect for your opponent to deal with. So those are the passive faction rules in Manafields. Despite the fact that all factions in the game share the same unit types with the same stats, these abilities radically change the way you play your army and the way you design your list. The next thing you get when you select a faction is access to their faction ability. You can think of these as similar to ultimate abilities in MOBAs or hero shooters. You charge your faction ability over time by killing enemy units, and once you've killed 5 enemy units, it costs you 0 order points to activate this ultimate. And these abilities can either help you to secure your win once and for all, or to catch up if you've been falling behind. The Undead faction ability allows you to issue 2 march orders to your army for free. A march order allows you to move every unit in your army 1 square. You cannot, however, end that movement adjacent to any enemy units. March orders may seem underwhelming. 1 square of movement doesn't sound like a lot, but on most turns you're only usually able to move up to 3 units at a time. So moving 10 or 15 units all together, putting pressure on every part of the board, is actually highly effective. Normally a march order costs 3 order points and a morale, but on this turn, using the Undead faction ability, you can do it twice and still have your 3 order points left over to use on other actions. Best of all, zombie units are the only unit in the game that's allowed to end their march adjacent to enemies. So if you've generated lots of zombies by killing enemy units, you can march them into positions that gum up your opponent's units and cause roadblocks that are time consuming to deal with. The Elves faction ability allows them to select 3 units and teleport them onto any objective square. This is a great way to get important units out of trouble or to pivot your forces to an objective where your numbers are dwindling. It's also a great way to strike out and attempt to assassinate the enemy general, scoring you an instant 6 points, which is often enough to win you the game. Between this and the Elves' passive ability to strike in combat and then leap away for free, Elves in Manafields are by far the most agile faction in the game. The Orcs faction ability allows them to issue 3 melee fight orders for free on that turn. This is a massive go turn for the Orcs. You can spend all 3 of your order points moving your units into combat and then issue 3 fight orders on top of that. Or if you've already cleverly placed your units in combat in the previous turn, you could potentially be doing 4, 5 or even 6 fight orders in a single turn. Best of all, even if your units have taken some chip damage in the previous turn, the Orcs passive rule means that all of your troops will still be fighting at full strength even if they're injured. The Humans faction ability gives the entire army +1 armor until their next turn. This is incredibly strong. It means, for example, that infantry and cavalry can only be damaged on 5s and 6s. The enemy on this turn is heavily dissuaded from wasting their turn trying to damage your units. And remember, the Humans passive ability is that units that haven't moved get +1 damage. So you could use this ability to gain +1 armor across your whole army. You could shove your units into combat with enemies. On their turn, the damage bounces off you. And then on your next turn, you'll hit back with devastating force thanks to the +1 damage. So those are the factions in Manafields. And even though they all share the same unit types and stats, each faction provides special abilities that prompt you to play them in very different ways. And you're also going to have to learn how to play against each of them. The same tactics are not going to work in every situation. Like I mentioned, all of these rules are fully implemented in the game now. Manafields is completely playable. The next things I need to do are to create the user interface and menus, add animations and sounds, and then the biggest task of all, networked multiplayer. I'm really excited about how it's coming together. What did you think of the factions? Which one do you think you'd pick? Which one sounds overpowered or underpowered? Let me know. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one where I'm going to show you the heroes and their abilities, and I might even show you how a full game looks. See you then.